Have you ever wondered what would happen if a simple act of kindness completely changed the course of your life? Olivia Bennet never expected anything extraordinary to happen that autumn afternoon in Central Park. As she gently guided the crying little boy with chocolate-smeared cheeks toward the park security office, she had no idea that his father, one of the most powerful men in New York City, was watching her every move from the shadows. She also had no idea that 12 hours later, he would be standing at her apartment door, rain-soaked, and determined to bring her into his world. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The autumn air carried a sharp chill as Olivia Bennet nestled deeper into the worn wooden bench, her favorite spot in Central Park. It was tucked away from the main pathways, partially hidden by a cluster of golden-leaf maples that provided just enough seclusion for her to feel comfortable. A threadbare cardigan wrapped around her slender shoulders as she balanced her well-loved copy of Jane Eyre on her knees, the pages softened from countless readings. At 27, Olivia had perfected the art of blending into backgrounds. Her light brown hair was perpetually gathered into a simple ponytail, and her wardrobe consisted of neutral colors that wouldn't draw attention. She worked as a children's librarian at a small branch library in Queens, a job that allowed her to connect with others through stories rather than direct interaction, which suited her just fine. The afternoon sun filtered through the branches above, casting dappled shadows across her book. Olivia had just reached her favorite part when a sound caught her attention, a hiccuping sob that seemed out of place among the peaceful park sounds. She looked up, squinting slightly as she scanned her surroundings. That's when she saw him, a small boy no older than 4, standing alone near the edge of the playground about 30 feet from her bench. His cheeks were streaked with tears, and his little shoulders shook with each sob. He wore a navy blue coat that appeared expensive, tiny red sneakers, and clutched a plush dinosaur to his chest so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Olivia hesitated, looking around for any sign of the boy's parents. The playground wasn't crowded, just a few nannies with their charges, and a couple of mothers chatting on nearby benches. None seemed to be looking for a missing child. She slipped her bookmark between the pages and stood up, approaching slowly so as not to frighten him. "Hi there," she said softly, kneeling down a few feet away to meet his eye level. "Are you looking for someone?" The little boy's tear-filled eyes met hers, his lower lip trembling. "I can't find my daddy," he whispered, his voice catching on another sob. "That must be scary," Olivia said gently. "My name is Olivia. What's yours?" "Leo," he answered, wiping his nose with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of what looked like chocolate ice cream across his cheek. "And who's your friend?" Olivia nodded toward the dinosaur. The boy's grip on the stuffed animal loosened slightly. "Rex. He's scared too." "Well, Leo and Rex, I think we should find your daddy. He's probably looking for you right now and feeling very worried." She kept her voice calm and warm, the same tone she used during story time at the library when the youngest children grew restless. Leo nodded, his dark curls bouncing slightly. "Daddy said stay by the swings, but then I saw a squirrel, and Rex wanted to chase it. Squirrels are very fast, aren't they?" Olivia smiled. "Would it be okay if I helped you find your daddy?" The boy studied her for a moment before nodding again. Olivia stood up but didn't reach for his hand, not wanting to make him uncomfortable. "Let's walk over to that security officer," she suggested, pointing to a uniformed park employee standing near the fountain about 50 yards away. "They can help us find your dad." As they walked, Olivia kept a respectful distance while ensuring Leo stayed close. "So, Leo, how old are you?" 4 3/4, he answered solemnly, his tears beginning to subside as he focused on their mission. 4 3/4 is very grown up, Olivia agreed. "And what does your daddy look like? Is he tall?" "Super tall." Leo stretched his arm up as high as it would go. "Taller than everybody, and he wears special suits that Mrs. Garcia has to iron very carefully." "That's helpful," Olivia said, making a mental note. "And what's your daddy's name?" "Daddy," Leo answered simply, then added after a moment's thought, "but other people call him Mr. Thorne." Olivia nearly stopped walking. Thorne wasn't a common name, And in New York City, it was associated with only one family, the Thorns of Thorn Enterprises, a massive tech and real estate conglomerate. But there must be other Thorns in the city, she reasoned. It couldn't possibly be Leo. A deep voice called out, tension evident in the single syllable. Olivia looked up to see a man striding toward them, his pace just short of running. Even at a distance, his presence commanded attention. He was tall, as Leo had described, with broad shoulders beneath what was undoubtedly a bespoke suit. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in worry. "Daddy!" Leo broke into a run, closing the distance between them. The man dropped to one knee, catching the boy in a fierce embrace that lifted him off his feet. Olivia stood back, relief washing over her. She watched as the man who she now realized with a jolt of recognition was indeed Alexander Thorn, CEO of Thorn Enterprises, and one of the wealthiest men in the country, held his son tightly, his eyes closed for Beth. A brief moment. When he opened them, his gaze immediately found Olivia. His eyes were an intense blue that seemed to pierce right through her. For a few seconds, neither moved, and Olivia felt as if she were being assessed, catalogued. Then Leo said something, pointing back at her, and Alexander Thorn's expression softened slightly. That was Olivia's cue to leave. She gave a small, awkward wave and turned quickly, walking briskly in the opposite direction. She could hear the man calling out, presumably to thank her, but the thought of engaging with someone like Alexander Thorn, someone so far removed from her quiet world, sent a flutter of anxiety through her chest. She retrieved her book from the bench and tucked it into her bag, keeping her head down as she made her way toward the park exit. By the time she glanced back over her shoulder, Alexander and Leo Thorn were nowhere to be seen. Just another New York moment, Olivia thought, as she boarded the subway back to her apartment in Astoria. By tomorrow, it would be nothing more than a story to tell her colleague Hannah during their lunch break, if she even mentioned it at all. Alexander Thorn watched the young woman hurry away, her slight figure quickly disappearing among the other park-goers. Something about her struck him as unusual, not her appearance, which was unremarkable in the conventional sense, but her demeanor. In his world of sharp elbows and sharper ambitions, people didn't simply help and disappear. There was always an angle, always a request or expectation that followed. "Daddy, that was Olivia," Leo said, still clutching Rex the dinosaur. "She helped me find you when I got lost." Lost, Alexander corrected automatically, then softened his tone. "She helped you?" Leo nodded enthusiastically. "She was reading a book, and then she asked if I needed help, and she was going to take me to the policeman, but then you found us." Alexander felt a twist of guilt. He'd been on a conference call, one he'd specifically scheduled during his designated time with Leo, and had only looked away for what felt like seconds. When he'd realized Leo wasn't by the swings where he'd left him, pure terror had gripped him. "Leo, what have I told you about staying where I can see you?" His voice came out harder than he intended, and he saw his son's eyes immediately fill with tears again. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Leo whispered. "Rex saw a squirrel, and we just wanted to look." Alexander sighed, reeling in his fear-driven anger. "I was very worried about you, buddy. When I can't find you, it scares me. Like how I was scared when I couldn't find you?" "Exactly like that." Alexander stood, lifting Leo into his arms even though his son was getting almost too big for it. As they walked toward the park exit where their driver would be waiting, Alexander's thoughts kept returning to the woman Olivia. There had been something almost familiar about her, though he was certain they'd never met. He would have remembered those eyes, warm amber flecked with gold, wide and expressive in a delicate face. She hadn't lingered for acknowledgement or appreciation, hadn't pulled out her phone for a selfie with a thorn or an autograph. She'd simply helped and gone, an increasingly rare quality in a city where everything and everyone seemed to have a price tag. Back in the sleek black SUV that waited at the curb, Alexander settled Leo into his car seat. His son was already chattering about the squirrel and how fast it could climb trees, the trauma of being separated apparently forgotten with the resilience of childhood. "Where to, Mr. Thorn?" his driver Reynolds asked. Alexander hesitated. "Home," he decided finally. "But first, I need you to make a stop." Olivia's apartment in Astoria wasn't much, but it was hers. After growing up in a house that never quite felt like home with parents whose voices raised more often than their spirits, having her own space, however small, felt like luxury. The one-bedroom walk-up on the third floor of a pre-war building had high ceilings, decent light, and just enough room for her books, which occupied every available surface. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined her living room walls, with smaller stacks forming precarious towers beside her armchair and bed. That evening, Olivia made herself a simple dinner of tomato soup and grilled cheese, changed into flannel pajama bottoms and an oversized NYU sweatshirt, a relic from her graduate studies in library science, and settled in with her book again. Outside, rain had started to fall, pattering against her windows in a soothing rhythm that made her small apartment feel even cozier. She had just turned the page when a sharp knock at her door made her jump. Glancing at the clock, 9:17 p.m., she frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone, and Hannah, her only regular visitor, always texted before coming over. Another knock, more insistent this time. Warily, Olivia approached the door and peered through the peephole. Her breath caught in her throat. Even through the distorted fisheye view, she recognized him immediately. Alexander Thorne, looking slightly less polished than he had in the park, but no less intimidating. For a moment, she considered pretending she wasn't home. What could he possibly want? How had he even found her address? But curiosity, or perhaps something else she couldn't quite name, had her reaching for the chain lock. She opened the door just wide enough to see him properly, keeping the chain in place. "Mr. Thorne?" Up close, he was even more striking than the brief glimpse she'd had earlier. Tall and broad-shouldered, with strong features and those piercing blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His dark hair was damp from the rain, and he'd abandoned his suit jacket, wearing just a light blue button-down with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He looked both powerful and somehow vulnerable, standing in her hallway. "Ms. Bennett," he replied, his voice deep and smooth. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I wanted to thank you personally for helping my son today." "How did you—" Olivia began, then decided she didn't really want to know how a billionaire had found her apartment. It was nothing, really. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't. You did. His gaze was unwavering. "May I come in?" Just for a moment. Every instinct told Olivia to politely decline. She didn't know this man, regardless of his public profile. And yet, there was something in his expression and earnestness that seemed at odds with his powerful image that had her closing the door to undo the chain. When she reopened it fully, Alexander Thorne stepped into her small entryway, bringing with him the scent of rain and expensive cologne. He seemed too large for the space, dwarfing her bookshelves and making her furniture look even more shabby than it was. "Leo wanted to give you this," he said, producing a small gift bag that she hadn't noticed him holding. "He was upset that he didn't get to thank you properly." Olivia accepted the bag hesitantly. "That's very kind, but completely unnecessary. To you, perhaps, but to me." He paused, something complicated passing across his features. "My son is everything to me, Ms. Bennett. Everything." The raw emotion in his voice caught her off guard. She glanced down at the bag in her hands, unsure how to respond. "Please, open it," he encouraged, seeming almost nervous, which struck Olivia as absurd. What did a man like Alexander Thorne have to be nervous about, especially around someone like her? Carefully, she removed the tissue paper and found inside a small blue velvet box. When she opened it, she couldn't suppress a small gasp. Inside was an exquisite silver bookmark, delicately engraved with a pattern of leaves and branches. "Leo mentioned you were reading when you noticed him," Alexander explained. "He picked this out himself, with some guidance," he added with the ghost of a smile. "It's beautiful," Olivia said honestly, running her finger over the intricate design. "But really, Mr. Thorne, I didn't do anything special." "Alexander," he corrected. "And you did, Ms. Bennett. In my experience, genuinely selfless acts are rare. When Leo described how you approached him, how calm you kept him, he trailed off, his gaze sweeping over her small apartment, lingering on the bookshelves. You're a reader." It wasn't a question, but Olivia nodded anyway. I'm a librarian, actually. Children's section. Something in his expression softened further. That explains it then. Your way with Leo. An awkward silence fell between them. Olivia fidgeted with the bookmark, hyper-aware of how out of place Alexander Thorne looked in her modest apartment, with its second-hand furniture and faded rug. Would you like some tea? She offered, surprising herself. As a thank you for the bookmark, though it seems a poor exchange. Alexander appeared equally surprised by the invitation. I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition, Olivia said, wondering if she'd lost her mind. Unless you have somewhere to be. Of course he had somewhere to be. He was Alexander Thorne, but he was already shaking his head. No other plans. Tea would be nice. And so Olivia found herself in the surreal position of making chamomile tea for a billionaire in her tiny kitchen, while he examined her bookshelf with undisguised interest. You have an eclectic collection, he commented, careful not to touch anything. First editions? Some, Olivia admitted, carrying 2 steaming mugs to the coffee table. I worked at a used bookstore all through college. The owner let me buy the valuable ones before they went on display. Alexander accepted the mug she offered. Do you have a favorite book? That's an impossible question. But she was smiling now, on familiar ground. It changes daily. Right now, I'm revisiting Jane Eyre. Ah, he nodded. The Governess and the Troubled Man with Secrets. Olivia raised her eyebrows, surprised. You've read it? My mother was an English professor before she married my father. Our house was filled with classics. Something shadowed his expression. Though I admit, it's been years since I've read anything that wasn't a contract or quarterly report. As they sipped their tea, the initial awkwardness gradually gave way to a surprisingly easy conversation. Alexander asked intelligent questions about her work at the library, seeming genuinely interested in her stories about the children who attended her reading sessions. In turn, Olivia found herself asking about Leo. He seems like a wonderful boy, she said. He is. Alexander's entire demeanor changed when speaking about his son, a tenderness emerging that transformed his face. He's curious about everything, always asking questions I don't have answers to. Like all the best 4-year-olds, Olivia smiled. And his mother? Is she? The question hung incomplete, but Alexander understood. Caroline died shortly after his birth. Complications no one saw coming. I'm so sorry, Olivia said softly. Alexander nodded, his expression closing slightly. Leo has her eyes, her curiosity too. Another silence fell, but this one felt different, companionable, rather than awkward. Alexander set down his empty mug and stood, prompting a curious mixture of relief and disappointment in Olivia. I should let you get back to your evening, he said. Thank you for the tea, Ms. Bennett. Olivia, she corrected, echoing his earlier response. And you're welcome. He moved toward the door, then paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Olivia, he said finally, testing her name. Would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow night? The question caught her completely off guard. Dinner? Yes, the meal typically consumed in the evening, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. I know what dinner is, Olivia replied, surprising herself with the slight teasing in her tone. I'm just trying to understand why you'd want to have it with me. Alexander's expression grew serious again. Because in the space of an afternoon, you've shown more genuine kindness toward my son than most people I've known for years. Because you didn't vanish as soon as you realized who I was out of disinterest, but out of… But… What? Shyness? Modesty? Either way, it's refreshing. And because, he added after a slight hesitation, I'd like to continue our conversation about 19th century literature without the constraints of impromptu tea service. Put that way, it was hard to refuse. Still, Olivia hesitated. I don't do well in fancy restaurants. The thought of sitting in some exclusive Manhattan establishment, being judged by waitstaff and other diners, made her palms sweat. Alexander seemed to consider this. What if it wasn't a restaurant? What if it was dinner at my home? Just us and Leo. He specifically asked if the book lady could come visit. The mention of Leo tilted her decision. All right, she found herself saying, but nothing elaborate. Alexander smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. I'll send a car for you. 7 o'clock? Olivia nodded, already wondering what she'd gotten herself into. At the door, Alexander paused once more. Thank you again, Olivia. Not just for helping Leo, but for the tea. It's been, he seemed to search for the right word, peaceful. After he left, Olivia stood in her silent apartment, the silver bookmark cool in her palm, wondering how a chance encounter in the park had led to the most powerful man in New York City, standing in her living room, drinking tea from her chipped mug and inviting her to dinner. The following evening found Olivia standing in front of her closet, face flushed with frustration. She'd never given much thought to her wardrobe beyond comfort and practicality, but suddenly her collection of cardigans, simple blouses, and well-worn jeans seemed woefully inadequate. It's not a date, she reminded herself aloud. It's a thank-you dinner, with his son present. Still, she changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple navy blue dress she'd worn to a colleague's wedding last year. It was the most expensive piece of clothing she owned, though it would probably be considered casual by Thorne standards. She paired it with ballet flats and a light cardigan, twisting her hair into a neater version of her usual ponytail. At exactly 6:09 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your car is downstairs. The sleek black SUV waiting at the curb was identical to the one she'd seen at the park. The driver Reynolds. He introduced himself, opened the door for her with a polite nod that revealed nothing of what he thought about his boss's dinner guest. As they crossed the Queensboro Bridge into Manhattan, Olivia tried to calm her nerves by focusing on the familiar skyline, now illuminated against the darkening sky. She'd expected they'd be heading to the Upper East Side, where New York's elite typically resided, but Reynolds drove them downtown, eventually pulling up to a modern glass building in Tribeca. Mr. Thorne's private elevator is this way, Ms. Bennett, Reynolds directed after handing his keys to a valet. Private elevator. Of course. The elevator required a key card, which Reynolds provided, and then she was ascending smoothly to what the panel indicated was the penthouse level. When the door slid open, Olivia stepped directly into a spacious foyer with soaring ceilings and walls of windows that showcased panoramic views of the city and the Hudson River beyond. Olivia! Leo's excited voice reached her before she saw him, and then he was there, running toward her with Rex the dinosaur trailing from one hand. He wore pajamas with dinosaurs printed on them, his curls still damp from what she assumed was a recent bath. Olivia knelt down to his level, genuinely pleased to see him. Hello, Leo. And hello, Rex. I'm happy to see you both again. Danny said you were coming for dinner, and I can stay up late because it's special, Leo informed her importantly. Do you like mac and cheese? That's what we're having because it's my favorite. Mac and cheese happens to be one of my favorites too, Olivia smiled. Leo, Alexander's voice came from deeper within the apartment. What did we discuss about giving our guest a moment to arrive before bombarding her? Olivia looked up to see Alexander approaching, dressed more casually than she'd seen him before in dark jeans and a simple gray sweater that somehow looked more expensive than her entire wardrobe combined. He looked younger this way, less like the intimidating CEO, and more like a father. It's fine, she assured him, standing up. I'm happy to see an enthusiastic face. Alexander's expression warmed. Then you're in luck. Leo has been talking about your visit all day. He stepped closer, taking her cardigan. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, Olivia replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. Your home is beautiful, she added, taking in her surroundings. The penthouse was undeniably luxurious, with its high ceilings, modern artwork, and designer furniture, but it was warmer than she'd expected, with comfortable-looking seating areas and children's books and toys tastefully incorporated into the decor. Come see my dinosaurs! Leo tugged at her hand, pulling her toward what appeared to be a play area near the kitchen. The next hour passed in a blur of dinosaur facts, Leo's infectious enthusiasm, and the surprisingly homey atmosphere of the Thorne penthouse. Alexander moved around the gourmet kitchen with unexpected ease, preparing what he claimed was gourmet mac and cheese, while Leo gave Olivia a detailed tour of his dinosaur collection. "He likes you," Alexander commented when Leo momentarily left to retrieve another dinosaur from his bedroom. "He's not usually discomfortable with new people. Children can sense when adults genuinely enjoy their company," Olivia replied. "And dinosaurs make for excellent conversation starters." Alexander handed her a glass of wine. "Is that librarian wisdom?" "Hard-earned experience," she smiled, accepting the glass. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Olivia felt an unexpected warmth spread through her at the contact. Dinner was served at a round table in a comfortable dining nook, rather than the formal dining room Olivia had glimpsed. The mac and cheese was indeed several steps above the boxed variety, with a crispy top and multiple cheeses that Leo proudly helped identify. The conversation flowed easily, centered mostly around Leo's preschool adventures and dinosaur expertise. "And then Ms. Patterson said my drawing was creative," Leo was explaining between bites. "Creative," Alexander corrected gently. "That's what I said," Leo insisted. "Olivia, do you like to draw?" Olivia smiled at his quick topic change, something she was used to from her young library patrons. "I do, though I'm not very good at it. I mostly draw simple pictures to go with the stories I read at the library." Leo's eyes widened. "You read stories? Like, out loud?" "That's her job, buddy," Alexander explained. "Remember how I told you Olivia works at a library? She reads books to children. Can you read to me?" Leo asked immediately, turning his full attention back to Olivia. "Before bed?" Olivia glanced at Alexander, unsure if this was overstepping. He gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. "If your dad says it's okay, I'd love to," she told Leo. The rest of the meal passed pleasantly, and soon it was time for Leo's bedtime routine. To Olivia's surprise, Alexander invited her to join them in Leo's bedroom, a spacious room decorated in shades of blue, with a star projection nightlight casting constellations across the ceiling. Leo selected a book from his extensive shelf, How Do Dinosaurs Say Goodnight, and climbed into his bed, patting the space beside him for Olivia. She sat carefully on the edge, acutely aware of Alexander watching from the doorway as she began to read. Years of storytime sessions had made Olivia an animated reader. She used different voices for each dinosaur parent and child, exaggerating her expressions for Leo's delight. By the time she finished, Leo was giggling despite his obvious sleepiness. "That was better than when Daddy reads it," he declared, then quickly added, "Sorry, Daddy." Alexander chuckled, moving to sit on the other side of the bed. "No offense taken, buddy. Olivia is a professional." "One more?" Leo pleaded, but his eyelids were already drooping. "Tomorrow," Alexander promised, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Time for sleep now." "Will Olivia come back tomorrow?" Leo asked, his voice already thick with approaching sleep. Alexander's eyes met Olivia's over his son's head. "We'll see, Leo. Sweet dreams." Olivia stood quietly, moving toward the door as Alexander adjusted Leo's covers and whispered something she couldn't hear. The tenderness in the scene made her chest tighten unexpectedly. There was something so intimate about witnessing this powerful man in his most human role. She waited in the hallway, studying the framed photographs that lined the wall, mostly of Leo at various ages, a few with Alexander, and one of a beautiful woman with dark curls and Leo's expressive eyes who must have been Caroline. "He's already asleep," Alexander said softly, joining her in the hallway and closing Leo's door most of the way. "Your reading voice is apparently magical." Olivia smiled. "It's the dinosaur voices. They're my specialty." They moved back to the living area, where Alexander collected their wine glasses from dinner. "Would you like to see the library? You have a library?" Olivia couldn't keep the excitement from her voice. Alexander's mouth quirked in that almost smile she was beginning to recognize. "I mentioned my mother was an English professor. When she passed away 5 years ago, I inherited her collection. I've added to it somewhat, though not as much as I'd like." He led her through the penthouse to a room she hadn't seen during Leo's tour. When he opened the double doors, Olivia couldn't suppress a gasp. The library was magnificent, 2 stories tall, with a rolling ladder to access the upper shelves, comfortable leather seating, and the warm scent of old books that always made Olivia feel at home. "This is incredible," she breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. Her fingers itched to examine the titles, to run her hands along the spines. "Please," Alexander gestured toward the shelves, seeming to understand her hesitation. "Explore." Permission granted, Olivia moved toward the nearest bookcase, scanning titles with undisguised delight. First editions of Dickens. A complete set of the Brontes. Is that a signed Hemingway? "My mother's pride and joy," Alexander confirmed, watching her with an expression that might have been amusement or something deeper. "She would have loved to see someone appreciate them as you do." Olivia carefully returned the volume she'd been examining to its place. "Thank you for showing me. I've never seen a private collection like this outside of a museum." "It doesn't get used nearly enough," Alexander admitted, moving to stand beside her. "I keep it maintained for Leo, hoping someday he'll develop the same love of literature that my mother had." "With you reading to him, I'm sure he will," Olivia said softly. "That's how it starts, hearing stories in the voice of someone who loves you." Alexander's gaze sharpened, studying her face as if seeing something new there. "Is that how it started for you, with your parents?" Olivia looked away, focusing on the books again. "No, actually. My parents weren't readers. But there was a librarian at my elementary school, Mrs. Finch. She noticed I was always hiding in the library during recess and started recommending books. Reading books became my escape." "From what?" Alexander asked, his voice gentle. Olivia hadn't meant to reveal so much, but something about the quiet library, the soft lighting, and Alexander's attentive presence made the words come easily. "From a home that was often tense. My parents argued a lot. Books were reliable when people weren't." Alexander was silent for a moment. "I understand that," he said finally. "After Caroline died, books were the only voices I could stand to hear besides Leo's. Business journals, mostly not exactly soul-nourishing material, but they kept my mind occupied." They stood side by side among the books, a strange sort of intimacy forming in their shared understanding of literature as refuge. Olivia was acutely aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his presence seemed to fill the space around her. "More wine?" he offered, breaking the moment. They settled into comfortable leather chairs near the fireplace, which Alexander lit with a remote control. Outside, the city lights twinkled, a carpet of stars below to match Leo's projected ones above. "Tell me more about your work," Alexander said, refilling their glasses. "What made you choose children's literature specifically?" Olivia cradled her glass, considering. "Children engage with stories completely. They haven't learned to be cynical yet, to question the magic or dismiss wonder as impractical. When a child connects with a book, it's pure and honest." She paused, then added with a small laugh, "Plus, they're much less intimidating than adults." "You find adults intimidating?" Alexander asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Some more than others," Olivia admitted, meeting his gaze briefly before looking away. "Am I intimidating you now?" His voice had dropped lower, a timbre that sent a flutter through her chest. "Less than yesterday," she answered honestly. "Though I'm still not entirely sure why I'm here." Alexander set down his glass, leaning forward slightly. "Would you believe me if I said I wasn't entirely sure either? That this isn't something I'd do, invite virtual strangers into my home, introduce them to my son?" "Then why did you?" He seemed to consider his words carefully. "When Caroline died, I built walls around Leo and myself. The world became divided into those inside our safe space and those outside it. For 4 years, almost no one new has crossed that threshold." He gestured around them. "And then yesterday, Leo got lost because I was distracted by work, and a quiet woman with kind eyes and a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre stopped to help him without asking for anything in return." The intensity in his gaze made something catch in Olivia's throat. "Anyone would have—" "No," he interrupted gently. "They wouldn't have. And even if they had helped him, they wouldn't have approached with such care, such patience. They wouldn't have calmed him with dinosaur talk or started walking him toward security, instead of immediately using the situation to approach me. Olivia looked down at her hands. I didn't know who you were at first, but you figured it out before I reached you, Alexander said. I saw the recognition in your face, and then you left, which was perhaps the most intriguing part. I don't do well with attention, Olivia explained. And you seemed to have everything under control. Leo was safe. That was what mattered. What matters, Alexander said quietly, is that for the first time in 4 years, I've met someone who makes me feel, He trailed off, and Olivia found herself holding her breath. Feel what? Calm, he finished. Present. When I'm in business meetings, my mind is always racing ahead to the next decision, the next acquisition, the next problem to solve. When I'm with Leo, I'm focused on being the father he needs. But there's rarely a moment when my mind is simply here. Until yesterday, in your apartment, drinking tea from a chipped mug and talking about books. Olivia didn't know how to respond to such honesty. She was used to fading into backgrounds, to being overlooked. Having Alexander Thorne's complete attention was like standing in a spotlight. I should go, she said finally, setting down her glass. It's getting late, and you probably have an early morning. I do, Alexander admitted, making no move to stop her. Meetings from 7 a.m. But I'd like to see you again, Olivia. Perhaps dinner without mac and cheese next time? The implication that this had indeed been some sort of date made her pulse quicken. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? He seemed genuinely curious, rather than offended. Olivia gestured vaguely around them. Your world is very different from mine. I'm not comfortable in spotlights or fancy restaurants. I like my quiet life. And you think I'd try to change that? Alexander stood when she did, maintaining a respectful distance. I think, Olivia said carefully, that your life comes with certain expectations, scrutiny. I'm a children's librarian who lives in a one-bedroom walk-up in Astoria and considers splurging on a new paperback a big financial decision. We're from different worlds. Alexander studied her face for a long moment. Perhaps. But for a few hours tonight, it felt like the same world. At least to me. He walked her to the elevator, calling Reynolds to take her home. As she stepped inside, he held the door open for a moment longer. Leo has story time at the library every Saturday, Olivia said impulsively. At the Queen's Public Library, Astoria branch, 10 a.m. If he'd like to come sometime. Alexander's expression softened. I think he'd like that very much. The doors closed between them, and Olivia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Whatever had just happened, whatever was happening was something entirely new. And despite her protestations, despite all her rational arguments about their different worlds, she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation at the thought of seeing Alexander Thorne again. Alexander stood looking at the closed elevator doors for several minutes after Olivia left. Something significant had just happened, something he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. From the moment he'd watched her kneel to speak to Leo in the park, something about Olivia Bennet had caught his attention in a way he couldn't easily dismiss. It wasn't just gratitude for her helping Leo, though that had been the catalyst. It was the way she'd run from recognition rather than toward it, the way she spoke about books with such genuine passion, the way she'd looked in his mother's library like she'd found a piece of heaven on earth, the way she'd read to Leo, fully engaged and present, creating a magical moment out of a simple bedtime story. He walked back through the penthouse, stopping to check on Leo, who was sleeping peacefully with Rex tucked under one arm. Then, instead of heading to his own bedroom, Alexander returned to the library. Crossing to one of the shelves Olivia had admired, he carefully extracted a worn copy of Jane Eyre. His mother's copy, the margins filled with her neat annotations. He hadn't opened it since her death 5 years ago. Alexander settled into the chair Olivia had occupied, her subtle floral scent still lingering in the air, and began to read. The next morning, Olivia woke earlier than usual, her dreams filled with leather-bound books and piercing blue eyes. She went through her morning routine mechanically, trying to make sense of the previous evening. Dinner with Alexander and Leo had been surprisingly comfortable, almost domestic in a way that should have felt strange but somehow didn't. The library had been a revelation, the kind of space she'd fantasized about since childhood. And then there was Alexander, himself intense, yet gentle, commanding, yet vulnerable, nothing like the cold businessman portrayed in the financial magazines. "Get it together, Olivia," she muttered to herself as she prepared for work. It was one dinner, a thank you dinner. A thank you dinner that had felt increasingly like something else by the end of the evening. At the library, her colleague Hannah noticed her distraction immediately. "Okay, spill," she demanded as they arranged books for the morning story time. "You've reorganized the same shelf 3 times, and you haven't heard a word I've said about the new budget cuts." Olivia blinked. "There are new budget cuts? See?" Hannah pointed an accusatory finger. "Something's going on. New guy?" "No," Olivia answered automatically, then hesitated. "Well, not exactly. It's complicated." "Complicated is my middle name," Hannah declared, pushing her purple-framed glasses up her nose. "Actually, it's Margaret, but that's boring. Tell me everything." So Olivia did, keeping her voice low as early patrons browsed nearby. She explained finding Leo in the park, Alexander's unexpected visit to her apartment, and the dinner invitation that had turned into something she couldn't quite define. By the time she finished, Hannah was staring at her with wide eyes. "Let me get this straight. You had dinner at Alexander Thorne's penthouse, the Alexander Thorne." "Shh." Olivia glanced around nervously. "Yes, but it wasn't like that. It was a thank you dinner, with his son present. A thank you dinner would be a gift card to a nice restaurant, maybe flowers," Hannah countered. "This was Liv. He's interested in you." Olivia shook her head firmly. "That's ridiculous. He's Alexander Thorne. He could date models, actresses, women who actually know which fork to use at fancy dinner parties. And yet," Hannah said pointedly, "he tracked down your address, brought you a gift, invited you to his home, introduced you to his son, showed you his private library, and asked to see you again. Those are not the actions of a man who's simply saying thanks for helping my kid." Put that way, it did sound different. But Olivia was saved from responding when the first group of children arrived for story time, their excited chatter filling the room. For the next hour, Olivia lost herself in the familiar joy of reading aloud, watching young faces light up with wonder at the adventures of Max in Where the Wild Things Are. She was just finishing the final page when movement at the back of the room caught her attention. Alexander Thorne stood in the doorway, Leo's small hand in his. They were both dressed casually, Leo in jeans and a dinosaur t-shirt, Alexander in dark slacks and a navy sweater, but still managed to look like they'd stepped out of a high-end catalog. Several mothers in the room had already noticed, nudging each other and whispering behind their hands. Olivia finished the story, her voice only slightly shakier than usual, and closed the book to enthusiastic applause from her young audience. "Remember, we'll have more stories on Saturday at 10 a.m., she reminded them as parents began collecting their children. "Now, who can roar like a wild thing before they go?" The resulting chorus of roars made Leo giggle from his spot by the door. As the crowd dispersed, he tugged on his father's hand, pulling him toward Olivia with unmistakable eagerness. "We came to your story time," Leo announced proudly, as if it had been his idea. "I see that," Olivia smiled, kneeling to his level. "What did you think of the Wild Things?" "They were awesome," Leo declared. "But I like dinosaurs better. Do you have dinosaur books?" "We have a whole section of dinosaur books," Olivia assured him. "Would you like me to show you?" Leo nodded enthusiastically, and Olivia finally allowed herself to look up at Alexander. He was watching their interaction with an expression that made her heart skip a bit, something soft and wondering, completely at odds with the powerful CEO persona. "I hope we're not intruding," he said. Leo woke up asking when he could hear you read again. "You're not intruding at all," Olivia assured him, standing up. "Storytime is open to everyone. Even billionaires?" he asked with a hint of a smile. "Even them," she confirmed, returning his smile despite herself. "Though you might be the first to attend." Hannah chose that moment to appear at Olivia's side, her expression entirely too innocent. "Liv, aren't you going to introduce me to your Friends? Alexander extended his hand smoothly. Alexander Thorne. And this is my son, Leo. Hannah Wilson, Hannah replied, shaking his hand with barely concealed excitement. I've heard so much about you both. Olivia shot her a warning look, which Hannah cheerfully ignored. All good things, I hope, Alexander said, his gaze returning to Olivia. The best, Hannah assured him. Liv, why don't you show Leo the dinosaur books? I can watch the front desk. Before Olivia could protest, Hannah had disappeared, leaving her alone with Alexander and Leo. With a resigned sigh that contained more amusement than actual annoyance, Olivia led them to the children's section. The dinosaur books are over here, she told Leo, who immediately ran to the colorful display. Feel free to look through as many as you'd like. While Leo became absorbed in a large picture book about Triceratops, Alexander moved closer to Olivia, lowering his voice. I apologize for showing up unannounced. Again. But when Leo asked about you this morning, it seemed like a sign. A sign of what? Olivia asked, keeping one eye on Leo. That I wasn't the only one who felt like something significant happened last night, Alexander replied, his gaze intent. Olivia busied herself straightening books that didn't need straightening. Mr. Thorne, Alexander, he corrected. Alexander, she conceded. I enjoyed dinner last night. Leo is wonderful, and your library is a dream. But I meant what I said about our worlds being very different. Yet here I am, in your world, he pointed out. And it seems quite pleasant. Before Olivia could respond, Leo appeared with an armful of dinosaur books that nearly obscured his face. Can we take these, please? How about we choose 3 for today? Alexander suggested, helping Leo narrow down his selection. To Olivia, he added, if that's acceptable? Of course, she nodded, taking the books to the checkout desk. As she scanned them, she was acutely aware of Alexander watching her, of the curious glances from other library patrons, of Hannah's barely suppressed grin from across the room. When can we come back? Leo asked as she handed him the books. We're open every day, Olivia told him. Story time is Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday mornings. Can we come to all of them? Leo looked up at his father expectantly. Alexander glanced at his watch. We'll have to work around some of my meetings, buddy, but we'll try. To Olivia, he added, would you have dinner with us again tonight? Leo has been asking. As if on cue, Leo nodded enthusiastically. Please, Olivia? You can read more stories. Looking from Leo's hopeful face to Alexander's carefully neutral expression, Olivia found herself nodding. All right, but this time, let me cook for you. At my apartment. Alexander raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised by the counteroffer. Are you sure? We wouldn't want to impose. I'm sure, Olivia said, wondering if she'd lost her mind. 7 o'clock? 7 it is, Alexander agreed, a genuine smile spreading across his face. We'll bring dessert. After they left, Hannah practically pounced on her. Did Alexander Thorne just ask you out in the middle of the children's section? He didn't ask me out, Olivia protested. He just invited me to dinner, with his son, again, and you invited them to your apartment, Hannah pointed out. Your apartment that barely fits 2 people comfortably, Olivia groaned, the reality of what she'd just done sinking in. What was I thinking? I can't cook for Alexander Thorne in my tiny kitchen. What would I even make? Something simple but delicious, Hannah advised. And tidy up those book towers before they arrive. Other than that, just be yourself. He clearly likes that person. He doesn't know me, Olivia argued. He's grateful that I helped Leo, that's all. Hannah shook her head. Denial isn't just a river in Egypt, my friend. That man looks at you like you're a rare first edition he just discovered in a dusty attic. The comparison, tailored perfectly to Olivia's bibliophile heart, made her blush despite herself. By 6:30 that evening, Olivia's apartment was as presentable as it was going to get. She'd spent her lunch break running to the market, selecting ingredients for a simple but hearty vegetable lasagna that was now filling her small apartment with delicious aromas. Her book towers had been consolidated into neater stacks, fresh flowers brightened her coffee table, and she'd changed into a soft green sweater that Hannah always said brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. At precisely 7 o'clock, A knock sounded at her door. Olivia took a deep breath, smoothed her hands over her jeans, and went to answer it. Leo burst in first, clutching a bakery box in both hands. "We brought chocolate cake. The lady said it was the best one." "Well, if the lady said so, it must be true." Olivia smiled, stepping back to let them enter. Alexander followed, carrying a smaller version of the gift bag he'd brought before and what appeared to be a bottle of wine wrapped in tissue paper. "Something smells amazing," he commented, handing her the wine. "Lasagna," Olivia replied, suddenly nervous about her menu choice. "I hope that's okay." "Perfect," Alexander assured her. "One of my favorites, actually." "Mine too," Leo declared, though Olivia suspected he would have said the same about almost any food mentioned. "I have some books picked out for after dinner," she told Leo, pointing to a stack on the coffee table. "Dinosaur books, of course." Leo's face lit up, and he immediately went to investigate while Alexander followed Olivia to her small kitchen. The space felt even tinier with his tall frame filling it, but there was something oddly comfortable about having him there. "Can I help with anything?" he offered, setting the gift bag on the counter. Olivia shook her head. "Everything's almost ready, but you can open the wine if you'd like." She handed him a corkscrew, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The simple contact shouldn't have sent a flutter through her stomach, but it did. While Alexander opened the wine, Olivia finished preparing a simple salad. "Leo seems very energetic tonight," she observed, glancing toward the living room where the boy was already engrossed in one of the dinosaur books. Alexander chuckled. "He's been excited all day. Kept telling Reynolds about the book lady who reads the best stories. I think you've made quite an impression." "He's easy to impress," Olivia said. "Just mention dinosaurs, and you're instantly his favorite person." "It's not just the dinosaurs," Alexander replied, his voice softening. "It's you, Olivia. The way you speak to him, listen to him. Children can sense authenticity." Olivia felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "He makes it easy. He's a wonderful boy." "Yes, he is," Alexander agreed, pride evident in his voice as he poured the wine into the mismatched glasses Olivia had set out. "The best thing I've ever done." Dinner was served at Olivia's small dining table, which she cleared of books for the occasion. The conversation flowed easily, centered mostly around Leo's enthusiastic descriptions of his day at preschool and his dinosaur discoveries at the library. Alexander and Olivia exchanged glances over his head, sharing smiles at his exuberance. "This is delicious," Alexander commented after his first bite of lasagna. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My grandmother," Olivia explained. "She lived with us when I was growing up. The kitchen was her domain. And cooking with her was—" She paused, searching for the right words. "It was peaceful. A refuge." Alexander nodded, understanding in his eyes. He seemed about to say more when Leo interrupted with an important dinosaur fact that simply couldn't wait. After dinner came chocolate cake, which Leo declared was the best ever, followed by story time on Olivia's small sofa. Leo nestled between them as Olivia read from the dinosaur books they borrowed that morning, adding her special voices that made him giggle uncontrollably. By the third book, Leo's eyelids were drooping, and he leaned heavily against his father's side. "I think someone's ready for bed," Alexander observed softly. Leo protested weakly, but his eyes were already closing. Within minutes, he was sound asleep, his small body slumped against Alexander. "I should get him home," Alexander said, though he made no immediate move to leave. But first, he reached for the gift bag he'd brought, carefully shifting to avoid disturbing Leo. "This is for you." "You don't need to keep bringing me gifts," Olivia protested, but accepted the bag nonetheless. "This one's different," Alexander explained. "Open it." Inside, Olivia found a beautiful leather-bound copy of Jane Eyre that looked at least a century old. She gasped softly, carefully opening the cover to find a handwritten inscription. "To my dearest Elizabeth, may you find in these pages the same comfort and wisdom I have. With love, Mother." "This was your mother's," Olivia whispered, looking up at Alexander in shock. "I can't accept this." "You can," he insisted gently. "My mother would have wanted it to belong to someone who truly appreciates it, someone who understands what books can mean." Olivia ran her fingers over the inscription, deeply moved by the gesture. "Thank you. I'll treasure it." "I know you will," Alexander replied, his gaze holding hers. "That's why I wanted you to have it." Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of the connection that had been forming since their first encounter in the park. Carefully, mindful of Leo sleeping between them, Alexander reached across and took Olivia's hand. "I know you think our worlds are too different," he said softly. "And perhaps they are. But when I'm with you, those differences don't seem to matter." Olivia looked down at their joined hands, at Leo's peaceful face, at the precious book in her lap. "I'm afraid," she admitted, barely above a whisper. "Of what?" "Of this. Of stepping into your world, of the attention, the scrutiny, of not fitting in." She met his gaze. "Of disappointing you." Alexander's expression softened further. "Olivia, you could never disappoint me. And as for my world, perhaps it's time for that world to change, not you." Before she could respond, Leo stirred slightly, mumbling something about dinosaurs in his sleep. The moment passed, but the warmth of Alexander's hand around hers lingered even after he gathered Leo into his arms to leave. At the door, with Leo's sleeping form draped over his shoulder, Alexander paused. "Have dinner with me tomorrow, just the two of us. Let me take you somewhere quiet, where no one will bother us." Looking up into his earnest blue eyes, Olivia found herself nodding. "Okay." After they left, Olivia stood in her silent apartment, holding the precious book to her chest. Whatever was happening between her and Alexander Thorne defied simple explanation. It was too soon, too unexpected, too unlikely. And yet, there was no denying the pull she felt toward him, toward Leo, toward the possibility of something she'd never allowed herself to imagine. The following evening, a sleek black car delivered Olivia to a small, elegant restaurant tucked away on a quiet street in the West Village. The maitre d' greeted Alexander by name, leading them to a secluded table in a back corner where they would be shielded from curious eyes. Olivia had fretted over her outfit for hours, finally settling on a simple burgundy dress that Hannah had insisted she buy for a library fundraiser last year. It was the most elegant thing she owned, though she'd felt Alexander's appreciative gaze linger when he'd met her at the car. "This place is lovely," she commented as they settled at their table, soft candlelight flickering between them. "How did you find it?" "It was Caroline's favorite," Alexander replied, surprising her with his honesty. She hated the showy restaurants where people go to be seen. This place values privacy. Olivia nodded, understanding the significance of his bringing her to a place that had been special to his late wife. "Where's Leo tonight?" "With Mrs. Garcia, our housekeeper. She's been with us since before Leo was born." Alexander smiled slightly. "He made me promise to tell you that he read one of the dinosaur books himself tonight, only asking for help with the biggest words." "He's a bright boy," Olivia said warmly. "He'll be reading completely on his own before you know it." "Thanks in large part to you," Alexander acknowledged. "He talks about you constantly. Olivia says this, and Olivia showed me that." "I've only known him for a few days," Olivia pointed out, though she was touched. "Sometimes, that's all it takes," Alexander replied. "Some people leave an impression that lasts far longer than their actual presence in our lives." The waiter arrived with the wine Alexander had ordered, giving Olivia a moment to collect her thoughts. When they were alone again, she decided to shift the conversation to safer ground. "How was your day?" she asked. "Any interesting acquisitions or mergers?" Alexander raised an eyebrow, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "Been researching me?" Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "Maybe a little. I was curious about what you actually do all day." "Mostly attend mind-numbing meetings and sign paperwork," he admitted. "Though today I did approve funding for a new tech incubator focused on educational software. That might actually make a difference in the world. Is that important to you? Making a difference?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "It is now. When I first took over the company after my father died, I was focused on growth for growth's sake. Bigger, faster, more profitable. But having Leo, it changes your perspective, makes you think about what kind of world you're leaving behind." Their conversation flowed easily through dinner, touching on books they'd both read, places they'd visited, and gradually more personal topics. Alexander spoke about growing up as the son of Richard Thorne, a notoriously demanding businessman who'd expected perfection. Olivia shared more about her childhood in a home where tension was the primary language and books became her escape. "Is that why you're so comfortable with silence?" Alexander asked as they lingered over dessert. "Because you grew up seeking it?" Olivia tilted her head, surprised by his perception. "I suppose so. Most people find silence uncomfortable. They rush to fill it." "I used to be that way," Alexander admitted. "Always pushing forward, filling every moment with activity or conversation. After Caroline died, silence became terrifying, empty. But lately, I've found it doesn't have to be. Silence can be full, can be full." Olivia agreed softly. Full of thought, of feeling, of connection. As if to prove her point, they fell into a comfortable silence, the candlelight casting warm shadows across the table between them. Alexander reached across, taking her hand as he had the night before. This time, there was no sleeping child between them, no imminent goodbye. Just his fingers intertwining with hers, his thumb tracing gentle patterns across her skin. "What are you thinking?" he asked after a while. Olivia considered deflecting, giving a safe answer, but found herself responding with honesty instead. "I'm thinking that I'm afraid of how comfortable this feels, how right, when it shouldn't feel either of those things." "Why not?" "Because we barely know each other," she pointed out. "Because you're you and I'm me. Because life isn't a fairy tale where the shy librarian and the billionaire fall in love over dinosaur books and 19th century literature." The word love hung between them, having slipped out before Olivia could censor it. She felt her cheeks flush, but Alexander's expression remained steady, his hand still holding hers. "Perhaps not," he acknowledged. "But life isn't bound by statistical probabilities either. Sometimes the most unlikely connections are the ones that matter most." On the drive back to her apartment, Alexander's hand remained near hers on the seat between them, occasionally brushing against her fingers in a touch that seemed both casual and deliberate. When they arrived, he walked her to her door, the hallway quieter than usual at this late hour. "Thank you for dinner," Olivia said, keys in hand, suddenly unsure of the protocol for ending an evening that had felt increasingly like a date. "Thank you for coming," Alexander replied, standing close enough that she could catch the subtle scent of his cologne. "And for being patient with my rusty dating skills. It's been a while." So, it had been a date. The confirmation sent a flutter through Olivia's chest. "You doing fine," she assured him with a small smile. "Though, I'm hardly an expert myself." Alexander's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. "May I kiss you goodnight, Olivia?" The direct question, asked with such genuine respect for her boundaries, touched something deep within her. Instead of answering verbally, Olivia nodded, her heart racing as Alexander stepped closer, one hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. His lips were warm and soft against hers, the kiss gentle and brief, yet containing a promise of deeper passion, carefully restrained. When he pulled back, his blue eyes had darkened slightly, his expression a mixture of wonder and desire that made Olivia's breath catch. "Good night, Olivia," he said softly, his thumb brushing once more across her cheekbone before he stepped back. "Good night, Alexander," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Inside her apartment, Olivia leaned against the closed door, fingers pressed to lips that still tingled from his kiss. Whatever was happening between them was moving quickly, perhaps too quickly, yet it didn't feel reckless or impulsive. It felt, against all logic, like finding something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander and Leo became fixtures in Olivia's life. They attended every story time they could manage, with Alexander rearranging board meetings and conference calls to make it possible. Evenings were spent either at Olivia's apartment, where she cooked simple meals that Leo declared were even better than Mrs. Garcia's, or at the penthouse, where Alexander gradually revealed his own surprisingly competent culinary skills. After Leo's bedtime, they would retreat to the library, sometimes reading silently side by side, sometimes discussing books, or sharing stories from their vastly different lives. Kisses goodnight grew longer, deeper, though Alexander never pushed for more, seeming to understand Olivia's need for a slow, cautious pace. "You're falling in love with him," Hannah declared one afternoon as they shelved books together. It wasn't a question. Olivia began to deny it automatically, then sighed. "It's complicated. Love usually is," Hannah replied sagely. "But the way your face lights up when they walk in, Liv, I've never seen you look like that before." Olivia couldn't deny the truth in her friend's words. Something had bloomed inside her, something warm and bright that made her feel more alive than she could remember feeling. And it wasn't just Alexander, it was Leo too, with his dinosaur facts and infectious giggle, his way of slipping his small hand into hers when they walked to the children's section. But doubts still lingered, shadows at the edges of her growing happiness. How long before Alexander realized they really were from different worlds? How long before the novelty of her quiet, bookish nature wore off? How long before the press discovered that Alexander Thorne was spending his evenings with a nobody librarian from Queens? That last question was answered sooner than she'd expected. One morning, as she walked to the library, a notification from Hannah popped up on her phone, a link to a gossip website with the subject line, "Call me now." Olivia clicked the link, her stomach dropping as a photo filled her screen. Alexander and her leaving the restaurant from their dinner date, his hand at the small of her back, her face captured in profile as she looked up at him. The headline read, "Thorne's New Flame? Billionaire Widower Spotted with Mystery Woman." Her phone rang immediately, Hannah's name flashing on the screen. "Did you see it?" Hannah demanded without preamble. "You're famous." "This isn't funny, Hannah," Olivia replied, her voice tight with anxiety. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." "It's just one photo on a trashy gossip site," Hannah assured her. "It's not like you're on the cover of People. Yet," Olivia added grimly. "You know it doesn't stop here. They'll figure out who I am, where I work, start digging into my past." "Liv, calm down," Hannah said, her tone gentler now. "Have you talked to Alexander about this?" "No." Olivia's phone beeped with an incoming call. Alexander's name on the screen. "He's calling now. I'll call you back." She switched calls, her heart pounding. "Hello? You've seen it?" Alexander's voice was tense, none of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to. "Yes," she confirmed. "Just now." "I'm sorry, Olivia. I should have been more careful. The restaurant owner assured me there would be no photographers." "It's not your fault," she said automatically, though her anxiety was mounting. "These things happen." "Yes, but they shouldn't happen to you." Alexander sounded angry now, though she understood it wasn't directed at her. "You value your privacy. I respected that. This is a violation. What happens now?" Olivia asked, pausing on the sidewalk, suddenly unsure if she should continue to the library, where curious eyes might be waiting. "Now," Alexander said, his voice shifting to the decisive tone she imagined he used in board meetings. "I send Reynolds to bring you to the penthouse. We discuss this privately, if that's acceptable to you." Olivia hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I'll wait at my apartment." 40 minutes later, she was riding the private elevator to Alexander's penthouse, her mind racing with possibilities, none of them pleasant. Would he suggest they stop seeing each other? Was this the reality check that would end whatever had been growing between them? When the doors opened, Alexander was waiting for her, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. Olivia stiffened briefly in surprise, then relaxed into his embrace, feeling some of her anxiety dissipate at his touch. "I'm sorry," he murmured against her hair. "So sorry." Olivia pulled back slightly to look up at him. "Alexander, it's okay. I knew something like this might happen eventually. But not like this," he insisted, leading her to the living room where his laptop sat open on the coffee table. "It's not just that one photo anymore. They've identified you." He turned the screen toward her. The original gossip site had updated their story with her name, occupation, and several additional photos. Olivia and Alexander at the park with Leo. Olivia entering her apartment building, even one of her at the library's front desk, clearly taken through the window. How did they get these so quickly? She whispered, sinking onto the sofa, her legs suddenly unsteady. Money, Alexander replied grimly, sitting beside her. Once they had a direction, they paid whatever it took to get more information. Doormen, neighbors, anyone willing to talk. Olivia scanned the article, wincing at phrases like ordinary librarian and unlikely romance and Thorne slumming it. There was speculation about her strategy for landing one of New York's most eligible widowers, and thinly veiled suggestions that she was after his fortune. "This is awful," she said softly. Alexander closed the laptop with more force than necessary. "I've already had my lawyers contact them. They'll issue retractions for the more defamatory statements, but, ooh." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "The damage is done. Your privacy has been compromised. What does this mean for us?" Olivia asked, the question she'd been dreading. Alexander looked at her sharply. "What do you want it to mean?" "I don't know," she admitted. "This is all so overwhelming." "Olivia." Alexander took her hands in his expression intense. "I need you to be very honest with me right now. Is this too much? Because if it is, I understand. You didn't ask for any of this." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. He was offering her an out, a chance to retreat to her quiet life, away from photographers and gossip columns and public scrutiny. A sensible part of Olivia's mind screamed that she should take it, that this glimpse of what dating Alexander Thorne would really mean should be enough to send her running back to the safety of her books and her solitude. But another part apart that had been growing stronger with each day spent in Alexander and Leo's company couldn't bear the thought of walking away. "It's a lot," she admitted slowly. "And I hate the idea of people speculating about me, about us. But," she looked up, meeting his worried gaze, "I don't want to end this, whatever this is." Relief washed over Alexander's features. "I don't either," he said, his voice low and fervent. "I've never felt this way, Olivia, not even with Caroline, though I loved her deeply. This is different. You're different." He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "We'll figure this out, I promise you." "How?" Olivia asked. "I can't hide in your penthouse forever." "No," he agreed. "But we can control the narrative. My PR team has been calling all morning. They want to issue a statement, something simple that acknowledges we're seeing each other without giving the tabloids more fuel." Olivia nodded slowly. "That makes sense." "And," Alexander continued, "I think we should attend the children's literacy benefit at the Met next week, together. On our terms, in our way." "A public appearance?" Olivia's anxiety spiked again. "Alexander, I don't know if I can. It's a library benefit," he reminded her gently. "Something meaningful to you. The press will be there regardless, because I'm on the donor committee. If we go together, openly, it takes away their power to make this seem scandalous or secretive." Put that way, it made sense, though the thought of facing cameras and curious stares still made Olivia's stomach tighten. But she thought of Leo's bright smile when she read to him, of Alexander's gentle touch and thoughtful conversations, of the way she felt more herself with them than she ever had alone. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll go with you to the benefit." Alexander's smile was worth the anxiety his proposal had caused. "Thank you," he said simply. Then, after a moment, "Leo will be disappointed to miss story time today." "Ow!" Olivia glanced at the clock, suddenly remembering her job. "I should call Hannah, let her know I won't be in." "Already taken care of," Alexander assured her. "I spoke with your director when all this broke. She was very understanding and suggested you take a personal day." Olivia wasn't sure whether to be grateful or unnerved by his efficiency. "So what do we do now?" "Now," Alexander stood, pulling her gently to her feet, "we have breakfast. Then, if you're willing, I'd like you to meet someone." Breakfast was served on the penthouse terrace, the autumn morning crisp, but sunny enough to be pleasant. Alexander moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. preparing eggs and toast while Olivia sliced fruit. There was something surprisingly comfortable about the domesticity of it, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together that morning. "Who is it that you want me to meet?" Olivia asked as they ate. "Vivian Moore," Alexander replied. "My PR director. She's been with Thorne Enterprises for 15 years and handled all the press when Caroline died. She's discreet, professional, and very good at her job." Olivia nodded, understanding the necessity even as her anxiety returned. "Will she want to remake me? Make me more suitable for the cameras?" Alexander's expression softened. "Vivian isn't like that. She understands authenticity is more valuable than any manufactured image. And I wouldn't want you to change a thing about yourself, Olivia. Not a single thing." True to Alexander's word, Vivian Moore turned out to be a brisk, no-nonsense woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes that missed nothing. But beneath her efficient exterior was a warmth that put Olivia at ease almost immediately. "So you're the librarian who's captured both Thorne men's hearts," Vivian said after introductions were made in Alexander's home office. "Leo called you the book lady with the dinosaur voices when I met him in the hallway earlier." Olivia smiled despite her nervousness. "That's me." "Good." Vivian nodded approvingly. "I like a woman who knows who she is. Makes my job much easier." The next hour was spent discussing strategy, how to handle the inevitable questions, what to say and what not to say, how to present themselves at the benefit. "The key," Vivian explained, "is to control the information flow without seeming to control it. We'll release a simple statement today. Alexander Thorne and Olivia Bennett are enjoying spending time together. Period. No details, no defensiveness." "And the benefit?" Olivia asked. "You'll arrive together, pose briefly for photos, and proceed inside," Vivian outlined. "We'll arrange a few short interactions with trusted reporters who won't twist your words. The goal is to appear comfortable, but not showy. Natural, like this isn't a big deal." "Even though it is," Olivia said softly. Vivian's expression softened slightly. "The public is fascinated by Alexander because he's kept his personal life private since Caroline's death. They're fascinated by you because you're not what they expected, not a model or an heiress or a socialite. But fascination fades when there's no drama to fuel it." "So we bore them into leaving us alone?" Olivia asked, a hint of humor creeping into her voice. "Exactly," Vivian smiled. "Now, about the benefit. Do you have something suitable to wear?" Olivia glanced down at her simple outfit. "I don't think so." "I thought not," Vivian nodded. "Not to worry. I've arranged for a stylist to bring some options here tomorrow. Nothing too flashy. We want you to look and feel like yourself. Just a slightly more formal version." After Vivian left, promising to return the next day with the stylist, Olivia found herself alone with Alexander again. The whirlwind of information and planning had left her feeling slightly dazed. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked, studying her face carefully. "I think so," Olivia replied honestly. "It's just a lot to process." Alexander moved closer, taking her hands in his. "You can still change your mind, Olivia. About any of it. All of it." She looked up at him, at the genuine concern in his blue eyes, and something settled within her. "I don't want to change my mind," she said softly. "I just need to get used to this new reality." His expression lightened. "Then we'll figure it out together," he promised. "One step at a time." Later that afternoon, Leo returned from preschool, bursting with excitement when he found Olivia waiting. The three of them spent the evening in a bubble of normalcy dinner, bath time for Leo. Stories before bed that made the morning's dramas seem distant and unimportant. After Leo was asleep, Alexander and Olivia retreated to the library, now their established sanctuary. As they settled into the comfortable leather chairs, Alexander asked, "What can I do to make this easier for you?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "Just be patient with me. This is all so far outside my comfort zone." "I have endless patience for you," he replied, his gaze steady on hers. "And Olivia, I want you to know something. If it ever becomes too much, this life, the publicity, any of it, you only have to say the word. We'll find another way." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. Alexander moved from his chair to kneel before hers, taking her hands in his. "I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Bennet," he said quietly, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "I don't say that lightly. I don't say it to pressure you. I say it because it's true, and because after losing Caroline, I learned that life is too short to leave important things unsaid." Olivia's heart seemed to stop, then race forward at double speed. "Alexander, he shook his head gently. "You don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand, especially after today. Whatever comes next, whatever we face with the press or the public, that's the truth beneath it all." Overcome with emotion, Olivia did the only thing that felt right in that moment. She leaned forward and kissed him, pouring into the gesture everything she wasn't ready to say aloud. Alexander responded immediately, his hands moving to cradle her face with exquisite tenderness. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Olivia whispered, "I'm falling too." The next week passed in a blur of preparation. As promised, Vivian arrived with a stylist who brought a selection of elegant but understated evening gowns. After trying several, Olivia settled on a deep emerald green that complemented her amber eyes and brought a subtle warmth to her fair skin. Simple, classic, with just enough detail to be special without being showy. The statement about their relationship was released as planned, generating a flurry of initial media interest that, as Vivian had predicted, began to subside when no additional drama emerged. There were still photographers occasionally stationed near Olivia's apartment building and the library, but the initial frenzy had died down. Alexander had suggested Olivia stay at the penthouse until after the benefit, using his private entrance to avoid the press, but she had insisted on returning to her apartment and her job after that first day. "I can't hide forever," she'd told him, "and I won't let them make me feel like a prisoner." He'd respected her decision, though he'd arranged for a car service to take her to and from work each day, which she'd accepted as a reasonable compromise. The evening of the benefit arrived with a mixture of dread and anticipation. Olivia had agreed to get ready at the penthouse, allowing Alexander's preferred hair and makeup team to help her prepare. The results were subtle, but transformative. Her light brown hair arranged in an elegant updo that framed her face softly, her makeup enhancing her natural features rather than masking them. When she emerged from the guest bedroom in the emerald gown, Alexander's expression made all the anxiety of the past week worthwhile. He stood completely still, his eyes traveling slowly from her face to the flowing hem of her dress and back again. "You are breathtaking," he said simply, his voice slightly rough. Olivia smoothed her hands over the silk fabric, still not entirely comfortable in such finery. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied with a small smile, taking in his impeccable black tuxedo and crisp white shirt. Alexander crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Ready for this?" "As I'll ever be," she nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. Leo, already in pajamas and settled in for an evening with Mrs. Garcia, insisted on seeing them before they left. His eyes widened comically when Olivia walked into his room. "You look like a princess," he declared, then frowned slightly. "But not a scary one like in the movies. A nice one." Olivia laughed, kneeling carefully beside his bed. "Thank you, Leo. That's exactly what I was going for, nice princess, not scary princess. Will you read me a story when you get back?" he asked hopefully. "It might be very late," Alexander warned. "I'll read you 2 stories tomorrow morning," Olivia promised, dropping a light kiss on Leo's forehead. "Sweet dreams, dinosaur expert." In the elevator down to the waiting car, Alexander took her hand, squeezing gently. "Remember what Vivian said? We walk in together, pose briefly, and move inside. You don't have to answer any questions you don't want to." Olivia nodded, her heart racing as the elevator descended. "I just don't want to embarrass you." Alexander's expression turned serious. "Olivia, that's not possible. The only thing that matters to me tonight is that you're comfortable. The rest is just noise." The car pulled up to the Metropolitan Museum, where a red carpet stretched from the curb to the entrance. Photographers lined the sides, their cameras already flashing as other attendees arrived. Olivia took a deep breath as Reynolds opened the door. Alexander stepped out first, then turned to offer his hand. As Olivia emerged, the flashes intensified, voices calling out Alexander's name, and questions about his new girlfriend. For a moment, the noise and lights were overwhelming, but then Alexander's hand settled at the small of her back, warm and steadying. "Just look at me if it gets too much," he murmured close to her ear. "We'll get through this together." They paused briefly for photos as Vivian had instructed, Alexander's arm around Olivia's waist, both smiling naturally despite the chaos around them. Then they proceeded inside, where the elegant surroundings of the Met and the focus on children's literacy caused dear to both their hearts helped ease Olivia's tension. Alexander kept her close throughout the evening, his hand rarely leaving hers as they navigated the crowd of New York's elite. He introduced her to colleagues and friends with simple pride, making no attempt to explain or justify her presence at his side. Gradually, Olivia began to relax, even engaging in conversation with several of the librarians and education advocates present for the fundraiser. "You're doing wonderfully," Alexander whispered during a brief moment alone, his lips brushing her temple. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I expected," Olivia admitted. "These people actually care about libraries and children's literacy. It makes the rest of it easier to handle. That's why I thought this would be the right event for your first public appearance." Alexander smiled. Common ground. As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself in conversation with an elegant older woman who introduced herself as Margaret Holloway, chair of the Literacy Foundation hosting the benefit. "Alexander tells me you run the children's program at your branch," Margaret said warmly. "We need more passionate advocates like you in the system." "It's just a small branch," Olivia explained, "but we try to make a difference in our community. Size doesn't matter nearly as much as heart," Margaret Cruff replied. "And speaking of heart," she glanced meaningfully at Alexander, who was deep in conversation with a museum board member nearby, but kept glancing back at Olivia. "I've known Alexander since he was Leo's age. His mother and I were colleagues at Columbia. I haven't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you since. Well, since before Caroline passed." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "It's still very new. Perhaps in time," Margaret acknowledged, "but not in significance, I think." She patted Olivia's hand. "Don't let all this intimidate you, my dear. Alexander needs someone who sees the man, not the fortune. From what I can tell, you do." By the time they returned to the penthouse, well after midnight, Olivia was exhausted but surprisingly content. The evening had gone better than she'd dared hope, with no major awkward moments and several genuinely pleasant conversations. "You were amazing," Alexander told her as they rode the private elevator up. "Everyone loved you." "I wouldn't go that far," Olivia smiled tiredly. "But it wasn't as terrifying as I'd imagined." In the penthouse, they moved quietly to avoid waking Leo and Mrs. Garcia. As Olivia began to remove the delicate earrings she'd borrowed for the evening, Alexander came to stand behind her, their eyes meeting in the hallway mirror. "Stay," he said softly, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "Not just tonight. Stay with us, Olivia. Here." She turned to face him, surprised by the sudden request. "Alexander, we've only known each other a few weeks." "I know," he acknowledged. "And if it were just me, I might not ask so soon. But it's not just me. It's Leo, too. He lights up when you're here. We both do. This place feels like a home when you're in it." Olivia's heart raced. "What exactly are you asking? To move in together?" "Yes," Alexander replied simply. "I'm asking you to be part of our lives completely, not just pieces of our days." The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. Olivia stepped back slightly, needing space to think clearly. This is a huge step, especially with everything else happening right now. "It is," he agreed. "But it also makes sense. The press would have less to stalk if you weren't going back and forth between our places. Leo would have the stability of having you here consistently. And I—" He hesitated, then continued honestly. "I would get to fall asleep beside you and wake up with you every morning." The image he painted was tempting, more so than Olivia wanted to admit. But caution still held her back. "What about my apartment? My independence?" "Keep the apartment," Alexander suggested. Use it as your personal space, a retreat when you need it. I'm not asking you to give up your independence, Olivia. I'm asking you to share our lives more fully. Olivia moved toward the large windows overlooking the city lights, gathering her thoughts. Can I think about it? This isn't a no, she added quickly, seeing his expression fall slightly. It's just a request for time. Alexander's face softened. Of course. Take all the time you need. The invitation stands. He moved to join her at the window, standing close but not touching. Do you remember what I told you in the library last week? He asked quietly. Olivia nodded, the memory of his declaration still vivid. You said you were falling in love with me. I was wrong, Alexander said, causing Olivia's heart to stutter painfully until he continued. I'm not falling anymore, Olivia. I've fallen completely. I love you. The simple declaration, spoken without drama or embellishment, struck Olivia with its sincerity. She turned to face him fully, reaching up to touch his face. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling right despite the whirlwind pace of their relationship. That's what scares me the most. How much I love both of you already. Alexander's arms encircled her, drawing her close. Don't be scared, he murmured against her hair. We've got you. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other as the city glittered below them, the enormity of what they'd just acknowledged settling around them like a mantle. Later, as they lay in Alexander's bed, Olivia's head resting on his chest, she asked softly, What would Leo think about me staying here? Alexander's hand stroked gently through her hair. He asked me yesterday when you were going to live with us forever. His words, not mine. Olivia smiled against his skin. Forever is a long time. Not long enough, Alexander replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Not nearly long enough when it comes to you. The following morning, Olivia woke to find Leo standing beside the bed, Rex the dinosaur clutched in one arm. You're still here, he exclaimed happily when he saw her eyes open. Does that mean you live with us now? Olivia glanced at Alexander, who was stirring beside her, his expression carefully neutral despite the hopeful question hanging in the air. Not yet, buddy, she answered gently. But I'm thinking about it. Leo's face fell slightly, then brightened. If you lived here, we could have stories every night, and pancakes every morning. Is that so? Olivia smiled, sitting up. Are pancakes part of the deal? Absolutely, Alexander chimed in, his voice rough with sleep. Pancakes are non-negotiable. Leo climbed onto the bed, settling between them with Rex. Can we have them now? And can Olivia make them? She makes them in dinosaur shapes. Only if she wants to, Alexander said, giving Olivia a questioning look. The scene was so domestic, so comfortable. Leo's sleepy excitement, Alexander's warm presence, the morning light filtering through the windows, that Olivia felt something shift inside her, a piece falling into place. Dinosaur pancakes coming right up, she agreed, smiling at Leo's cheer of delight. In the kitchen, mixing batter while Leo chattered about which dinosaurs he wanted today, Olivia found herself imagining mornings like this stretching into the future. The thought, which should have terrified her, instead brought a sense of rightness, of belonging. Alexander appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her neck. Penny for your thoughts? Olivia turned in his embrace, the wooden spoon still in her hand. Yes, she said simply. His brow furrowed slightly in confusion. Yes? Yes, I'll stay, she clarified, feeling surprisingly calm about a decision that would completely change her life. Not right away. We should do this properly, with time for Leo to adjust and for me to sort out my apartment. But yes, I want to be here, with both of you. Alexander's face transformed with joy, a smile breaking across his features that made him look younger, freer. He lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace, causing her to laugh in surprise. We're making dinosaur pancakes, Leo announced from his seat at the counter, confused by the celebration. Yes, we are, Alexander agreed, setting Olivia gently back on her feet but keeping her close. And we have something special to tell you. Together, they explained to Leo that Olivia would be coming to live with them soon, carefully setting expectations that it wouldn't happen immediately. His excitement was infectious, his immediate acceptance of this new family arrangement touching in its simplicity. "Will you be like my mommy?" he asked Olivia suddenly, his expression curious rather than troubled. Olivia knelt to his level, choosing her words carefully. "I could never replace your mommy, Leo. She will always be your mommy, and she loved you very much. But I will love you too, in my own way, if that's okay with you." Leo considered this for a moment, then nodded solemnly. "That's okay. Dad says there's never too much love." Over his head, Olivia's eyes met Alexander's, seeing in them the same mixture of emotion. She felt gratitude for Leo's acceptance, acknowledgement of Caroline's continued presence in their lives, and hope for the future they were beginning to build together. "Your dad is very wise," Olivia told Leo, ruffling his curls gently. "Occasionally," Alexander agreed with a smile. "Now, I believe someone was promised dinosaur pancakes?" As they moved around the kitchen together, preparing breakfast with Leo's enthusiastic help, Olivia marveled at how far they'd come in such a short time. From a chance encounter in the park to this moment of quiet joy, their lives had intertwined in ways none of them could have predicted. There would be challenges ahead, the press to manage, two households to combine, the delicate balance of building a new family while honoring what came before. But looking at Alexander and Leo, their faces bright with happiness at her decision to stay, Olivia knew with certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months later, the spring sunshine streamed through the penthouse windows as Olivia arranged a stack of new children's books on the shelf in what was now officially her library. After careful consideration, she had kept her apartment in Astoria, converting it into a small community reading space for neighborhood children who needed quiet places to study or read, a decision Alexander had enthusiastically supported both emotionally and financially. The transition to living together had gone more smoothly than she'd anticipated, with Leo's complete acceptance making everything easier. Her books had integrated seamlessly with Alexander's mother's collection, the library now a true reflection of both their literary souls. The press had eventually moved on to newer, more dramatic stories, though Olivia and Alexander still occasionally appeared in the society pages when they attended literacy fundraisers together. To Olivia's surprise, she'd gradually grown more comfortable with the public aspects of Alexander's life, finding strength in his steady presence and the knowledge that their private world remained sacred. "Dad! Olivia! Look!" Leo's excited voice echoed through the penthouse as he ran in from the terrace, where he'd been examining plants in the small garden they'd started together. He held up a jar containing something small and green. "I found a caterpillar. Can we keep it and watch it turn into a butterfly?" Olivia smiled, setting down the book she'd been organizing. "That depends on what kind of caterpillar it is. Some need special food." "I'll get my bud book," Leo declared, racing off to his bedroom, where a growing collection of nature guides now shared space with his beloved dinosaur books. Alexander appeared in the doorway of the library, watching the exchange with a warm smile. "He's added another creature to his expertise, I see. Dinosaurs, stars, and now butterflies," Olivia nodded. "He's developing quite the scientific mind." "Like his mother," Alexander acknowledged softly. Caroline had been a biologist before her death, a fact they'd shared with Leo as he grew more curious about the woman in the photographs throughout their home. Alexander crossed the room to where Olivia stood, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked, a question he still posed regularly, as if checking the temperature of their shared life. "Very," she answered truthfully, leaning back against his chest. "Though a bit nervous about tonight." "The gala?" Alexander kissed her temple lightly. "You've attended a dozen events now. You're practically a seasoned socialite." Olivia laughed at the absurdity of the description. Despite her growing comfort at public functions, she remained the same quiet, book-loving woman she'd always been. "Hardly, but this one feels different." The evening's event was the official launch of the Thorn Literacy Foundation, a project Olivia and Alexander had developed together over the past months. Using a significant portion of Thorn Enterprises' charitable fund, the foundation would support library programs in underserved communities across the city, with plans to expand nationally if successful. "Different because it's ours?" Alexander suggested. understanding as always. Yes, Olivia nodded. It matters more. Leo reappeared, waving a nature guide triumphantly. Found it. It's a monarch butterfly caterpillar. It needs milkweed to eat. Then we should get some milkweed, Alexander said seriously. Perhaps we can add it to our garden. As Leo began explaining the butterfly life cycle with enthusiasm, Olivia marveled at how complete her life had become. The shy librarian who had once avoided attention now stood at the center of a family, preparing to step onto a public stage for a cause she believed in deeply. Later that evening, as they prepared for the gala, Alexander called Olivia into the bedroom they now shared. He stood by the dresser, a small velvet box in his hand. I have something for you, he said, an unusual hint of nervousness in his voice. Olivia approached cautiously, eyeing the box. Alexander, it's not what you're thinking, he assured her quickly. Though that conversation isn't far off, if you're ready for it. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant and open book crafted in platinum and diamonds, with tiny emeralds marking the pages. It's beautiful, Olivia breathed, as Alexander removed it from the box. Turn around, he instructed softly, fastening it around her neck when she complied. I had it made specially. The emeralds matched the dress you wore to our first benefit, the night everything changed. Olivia touched the pendant gently, moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Thank you. Alexander turned her to face him, his expression suddenly serious. Before we leave tonight, there's something I need to say. What is it? Olivia asked, concerned by his tone. He took both her hands in his. When Caroline died, I thought that part of my life was over. The part where someone understood me, challenged me, completed me. I built walls around myself and Leo, believing they would protect us from further pain. Alexander's thumb traced gentle patterns on her wrist. Then you found my son crying in a park, and instead of asking for a reward or recognition, you simply helped him and walked away. You broke through walls I thought were impenetrable, with nothing but kindness and a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre. Olivia felt tears gathering in her eyes as he continued. These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life, Alexander said, his voice growing husky with emotion. Watching you with Leo, seeing you slowly bloom into the confident woman who still reads with different voices for every character, falling asleep beside you each night and waking to your smile each morning. I didn't know life could be this full again. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a second, smaller velvet box. This time, when he opened it, a platinum ring with a single perfect diamond nestled inside. I'm not asking you tonight, he clarified, as Olivia's breath caught. Not here, in our bedroom, while we're rushing to get ready for an event. You deserve a proper proposal, something special and meaningful. But I wanted you to know that the ring exists, that the question is coming. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks as he continued. I want you to walk into that ballroom tonight knowing exactly how much you mean to me, to us. How permanent your place is in our lives. The foundation we're launching tonight isn't the only foundation I'm building with you. Olivia Bennett. Unable to speak through her emotion, Olivia wrapped her arms around Alexander's neck, pulling him into a kiss that expressed everything words couldn't capture: her love, her certainty, her gratitude for the remarkable journey that had begun with a lost little boy in Central Park. When they finally parted, Alexander gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. So, when the time comes, and I ask properly with Leo's help, because he insists on being part of it, the answer will be yes? Olivia found her voice at last. The answer will be yes, she confirmed softly. Today, tomorrow, always yes. Alexander's smile was radiant as he closed the ring box and returned it to his pocket. Then let's go launch our foundation, Ms. Bennett. The future Mrs. Thorne can wait a little longer to make her official debut. As they collected Leo from Mrs. Garcia's care for the early portion of the evening, Alexander had insisted that the launch of their family foundation should include all family members. At least for the opening speeches, Olivia felt a profound sense of contentment settle over her. The shy girl who had once hidden behind books had found not just love but a purpose, a family, a place where she belonged completely. It hadn't come in the form she'd expected. A billionaire and his son were hardly the traditional fairy tale for someone who preferred to blend into backgrounds, but perhaps that was what made it perfect. In the elevator descending to the waiting car, Leo between them holding both their hands, Olivia caught Alexander's eye over their son's head. The love reflected there made her heart swell with certainty. Whatever came next, marriage, perhaps more children, the expansion of their foundation, the inevitable ups and downs of life, they would face it together, their unlikely beginning having grown into something unshakable. "Ready?" Alexander asked as the elevator doors opened, a question that encompassed far more than just the evening ahead. Olivia squeezed both his and Leo's hands, stepping forward with confidence she'd once thought impossible. "Ready," she confirmed, moving toward their future with the two people who had shown her that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness. And as the cameras flashed when they arrived at the gala, Olivia Bennet, no longer the shy librarian, but a woman fully embracing her unexpected journey, smiled with genuine joy. The book pendant at her throat, a reminder of where she'd come from, and the ring waiting in Alexander's pocket, a promise of where they were going. Together.